She vanished from the world of wealth, only to return more powerful. After being used, lied to, and betrayed by a man who followed her to a quiet village to steal her heart and money, Emily disappeared. But what he didn't know, she's the billionaire heiress he can't afford to cross. Now she's back, and this time, it's payback. Before we dive into this unforgettable revenge story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Emily Johnson, at 26 years old, had everything anyone could dream of. She was the only daughter of Mr. James and Mrs. Mary Johnson, one of the wealthiest families in the country. Her father owned a large empire of companies, while her mother was a renowned philanthropist. Emily had grown up in luxury, surrounded by expensive cars, grand mansions, and all the finest things money could buy. However, despite all the riches, Emily felt something was missing. People around Emily always seemed more interested in her family's fortune than in her as a person. She had friends, but over time she realized they cared more about her lifestyle than who she really was. The men she dated were the same, interested in her wealth and status, but never her heart. Emily longed to be loved for who she truly was, not for her family's wealth. One evening, after a particularly shallow conversation with a man her father had introduced her to, Emily knew something had to change. This man, like so many others, was more interested in impressing her with his wealth than learning anything about her. She wanted more. She wanted a life where she could be herself and find love not based on her family's name, but on who she truly was. Emily decided that she needed to leave her life of privilege behind, at least for a little while. She wanted to experience the world outside her bubble, to live simply and discover if she could find love in a place where no one knew her background. Before she made any drastic decisions, Emily sat down with her parents to discuss her plan. They were sitting in the large dining room of their mansion. "I've been thinking about something for a while," Emily began, her heart racing. "I want to leave the city for a while. I need time to find myself away from everything here." Her mother, Mrs. Mary, immediately frowned. "Leave? Emily, you're a young woman. The world outside is harsh, especially for a girl like you. You don't need to go anywhere. We can find you a good husband here, someone who will love and care for you." Emily sighed, knowing her mother wouldn't understand. "But that's the problem, Mom. All the men I meet are only interested in what I have, not in me. I want to live a simple life for a while, away from all this. I want to find someone who loves me for who I am." Mrs. Mary shook her head. "It's not safe out there for a girl like you. What if something happens? How will you survive without the comfort and protection of this home? You don't need to struggle when everything you need is right here." Emily looked at her father, hoping for support. Mr. James, a stern but thoughtful man, had been listening quietly. "I won't be gone forever," Emily said, turning to her father. "I just need some time to figure things out. If I don't find what I'm looking for, if I can't find love on my own, I'll come back. I'll agree to marry the man you want me to marry." Her father raised an eyebrow. "You mean the tech billionaire David, who you have adamantly refused to meet?" "Yes," Emily nodded. "I'll meet him eventually, but first I need to do this. I need to know if I can live a life where people see me for me, not for our name." Mr. James leaned back in his chair, considering his daughter's words. He loved Emily dearly, and as much as he wanted her to marry someone powerful like David, he understood her need for independence. He had seen her frustration over the years, trying to find someone who valued her for more than her wealth. Mrs. Mary, however, was not convinced. "James, tell her this is a bad idea. She's a girl. She can't just wander off on her own. The world isn't kind to women, especially one who's never known hardship. It's dangerous." But Mr. James gave Emily a small nod of approval. "If this is what you need to do, Emily, then I'll support you. I don't want you to regret not trying to find your own path." He turned to his wife. "She's strong, Mary. We have to trust her." Mrs. Mary sighed, still uneasy. "Fine. But promise me you'll be careful, Emily." "I will, Mom," Emily said with a smile. "I won't be gone long. I just need time away from all the trouble here." And with that, Emily's plan was set. She packed a small suitcase with only simple clothes, leaving behind her expensive dresses, jewelry, and the life of luxury she had always known. The next day, with her father's reluctant blessing and her mother's worried gaze, Emily left the city. She boarded a bus to a faraway place, hoping to start fresh. The city she chose was Makalani, a small but bustling town known for its vibrant markets and hard-working people. It was a place where no one would recognize her as the wealthy heiress from the capital. Here, Emily could blend in and live a simple life, just like anyone else. When Emily arrived in Makalani, she found a small one-room apartment to rent. It was nothing like the mansion she had grown up in, but it was enough for her. The apartment had only a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the busy streets below. There were no luxuries, no servants to cater to her every need. But for the first time in her life, Emily felt free. Now that she was settled, Emily knew she needed to find a job. She couldn't live off her family's wealth if she truly wanted to experience life as an ordinary person. After walking around the streets of Makalani for a few days, she came across a small restaurant called Mama K's Kitchen. The diner had a cozy, inviting atmosphere with the smell of home-cooked meals filling the air. It was always busy with people coming and going, and something about the simplicity of the place drew Emily in. With her heart racing, Emily walked inside and asked Mama K, the owner, if she had any job openings. Mama K was a kind woman in her mid-50s with a round face and a warm smile. She looked Emily over, noticing her neat but modest clothes, and asked a few questions. Satisfied with Emily's answers, Mama K decided to give her a chance. "We can use another waitress around here," Mama K said, "but it's tough work. You'll be on your feet all day serving tables, cleaning up, and dealing with all kinds of customers. Do you think you can handle it?" Emily smiled, determined to prove herself. "Yes, I can handle it. I'll do my best." And so Emily began her new life as a waitress at Mama K's Kitchen. The work was much harder than she had ever imagined. She spent long hours on her feet, carrying trays of food, cleaning tables, and taking orders. Her back ached and her hands became rough from the constant cleaning. But despite the exhaustion, Emily found a sense of purpose in this simple life. For the first time, she was living a life that wasn't handed to her on a silver platter. The customers at Mama K's Kitchen were regular people, workers, families, and students who came in for affordable meals. They treated Emily just like any other waitress, and that's exactly what she wanted. She was no longer the rich heiress from a powerful family. She was just Emily, the new waitress at the diner. As Emily wiped down a table one evening, she looked out at the busy streets of Makalani and smiled to herself. She had left behind the world of wealth and privilege, but in doing so, she had found something more valuable: freedom. She wondered what the future held. Would she find the love she had been searching for? Or would she eventually return to her old life, marrying the man her father wanted? For now, she was content to wait and see. This was her time to find out who she truly was. And her journey had only just begun. As Emily continued working at Mam's kitchen, her life in Makalani began to settle into a routine. The work was still exhausting, but the sense of independence she felt made it worthwhile. However, everything changed one evening when Tony, the kind construction worker she had gotten to know over the past few weeks, asked her out on a date. It had been a long day at the diner, and Emily was busy cleaning up when Tony, with his usual warm smile, approached her. "Hey, Emily," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I know a quiet spot by the river." Emily's heart raised. She had grown fond of Tony's company over the past few weeks. He seemed genuine, down-to-earth, and different from the men she had known back in her old life. There was no pretense, no showy displays of wealth, just simple, honest conversations. And more importantly, she thought, he didn't know anything about her background. To Tony, she was just Emily the waitress. Smiling, she agreed. "I'd love that." Their first few dates were wonderful. Tony took her to quiet, simple places where they could talk, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. He listened to her stories about working at the diner, shared his experiences as a builder, and made her feel special. Emily felt herself opening up to him, thinking that maybe she had finally found the love she was looking for here in this small town, with a man who didn't know she was an heiress. It seemed possible. But as the weeks went by, Emily began to notice small, troubling signs in her relationship with Tony. It started with him borrowing small amounts of money. "Hey, Emily, could you lend me a little cash? I've got an urgent bill to pay and my paycheck got delayed," he said casually one evening. At first, Emily didn't think much of it. She had saved some money from her work at the diner, and it wasn't a big deal to help him out. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, Tony had a reason, a broken tool, an unexpected expense, or a favor he needed to return. The amounts were small at first, but they quickly added up. Emily found herself dipping into her savings more and more. But she didn't want to think the worst. After all, Tony didn't know she was wealthy. He couldn't possibly be using her for money. However, as time passed, Emily started noticing other things. Tony often spoke about how she could aim higher in life, hinting that she should be doing more than just working at the diner. "You're smart, Emily," he said one afternoon as they sat by the river. "Why settle for waiting? You could be doing bigger things." The way he said it made her feel uneasy, as though he knew something about her that he wasn't saying. He seemed to push her towards something greater, as if he expected more from her than she was willing to reveal. Emily brushed it off at first, thinking he just wanted to motivate her. But the nagging feeling in her chest grew stronger with each passing day. Then came the afternoon that shattered her world. It was a quiet day at the diner, and Emily had just finished her shift. She was walking out the back when she saw Tony leaning against the wall, talking on his phone. He didn't notice her approach, so she stopped, curious to hear what he was saying. "Yeah, man, it's going well," Tony said, his voice low but confident. "I'm close to getting more out of her. I'm telling you, guy, calm down. You know these rich kids can be spoiled. I followed her here to Makalani. Imagine the access to the Johnson Empire. Pretending to be poor, all this about self," he added with a loud laugh. Emily froze in place. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tony knew who she was all along. He had followed her to Makalani. Yeah, her dad's the billionaire. I found out where she went after she left the city. She's trying to live a quiet life or something, but I'm working on it. She's already giving me money. It won't be long before I get more out of her. Tears filled Emily's eyes. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every smile, it was all a lie. Tony hadn't cared about her as Emily the waitress. He had only seen her as Emily Johnson, the rich heiress. He had known all along and had used her, just like the others. With her heart shattered, Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. So this was your plan all along? Tony turned sharply, his eyes wide with shock. Emily, don't. She held up a hand to stop him. I heard everything. You knew who I was, and you followed me here just to use me. Tony opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt on his face was enough for Emily to know the truth. Without waiting for an explanation, she turned and walked away, her tears flowing freely. She had trusted him and believed that she had found something real, but it had all been a facade. Tony had been playing her from the very beginning. That night, Emily made a decision. She couldn't stay in Makalani any longer. The town had become tainted by the betrayal she had suffered. She needed to go somewhere even more remote, somewhere where no one would find her and where she could truly start over. She packed her things, her heart heavy with disappointment, and called her parents. Her mother answered first, her voice filled with concern. Emily, darling, are you all right? You haven't called in a while. I'm fine, Mom, Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. But I need more time. I'm leaving Makalani. I need space. Her mother, sensing something was wrong, began to protest. Emily, you're a young woman. We can send someone to. I'll be fine, Emily interrupted. I'll keep in touch, but not as often. Please don't worry about me. I just need to figure things out on my own. Her father, who had been listening quietly in the background, spoke up. We trust you, Emily. But remember, you can always come home. You don't have to do this alone. Emily sighed, her heart aching with both sadness and gratitude. I know, Dad. I'll be okay. And with that, Emily ended the call. She was determined to move forward, to find herself once again in a place where no one knew her past. She didn't know where her journey would take her, but one thing was certain. She would never let anyone take advantage of her again. Emily had left the bustling life of Makalani behind. After Tony's betrayal, she knew she needed a complete change of scenery, something far from the town life she had grown used to. She wanted to find peace away from the people who might recognize her or take advantage of her wealth. With her heart still heavy from disappointment, Emily decided to move to a rural village far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The village she chose was small and quiet, with dusty roads, simple houses, and a slower pace of life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest excitement was market day, and where strangers were noticed. Emily was sure that no one here would know about her past, her family, or the riches she had left behind. She had become skilled at keeping her identity hidden, and in this village, she could start over once again. After settling into a modest room she rented from an old widow, Emily decided she needed to find a job. Her savings were running low, and she wanted to earn her way like any ordinary person. As she walked through the village one sunny afternoon, she passed a small supermarket and noticed a handwritten sign in the window, salesgirl needed. It seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, Emily walked inside and asked the shopkeeper if the job was still available. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, introduced himself as Mr. Paul. He asked a few simple questions about her experience and background. Emily, sticking to her story, told him she had finished secondary school and had worked odd jobs in other towns before arriving here. Mr. Paul seemed satisfied with her answers and hired her on the spot. "You can start tomorrow," he said, handing her an apron. "It's nothing too hard, just stocking shelves, helping customers, and keeping the place tidy." Emily thanked him and left the supermarket feeling relieved. This was exactly what she needed, a simple job in a quiet village, far away from the painful memories of Tony and Makalani. The next morning, she arrived at the supermarket ready to begin her new role. That's where she met Julia. Julia was the other salesgirl at the supermarket. She was in her early 20s with bright eyes and a friendly smile. She was quick to welcome Emily, and they soon became friends. Julia was easy to talk to, and as they worked side by side, they shared stories about their lives. Emily told Julia that she was an orphan who had only completed secondary school, carefully sticking to her fabricated story. She didn't want anyone here to know who she really was, not after what had happened in the past. Julia, in turn, shared her dreams and hopes with Emily. "I stay with my uncle and aunt," Julia said one day as they restocked the shelves. "They're nice, but the village is too small for me. I want more from life." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, curious. "I want to marry a rich man," Julia replied with a determined look in her eyes. "I want to leave this village, move to the big city, and live a better life. I've always dreamed of wearing fancy clothes and living in a nice house. This place is too small for me." Emily nodded, understanding her friend's ambition. Julia was sweet, but it was clear that she had her sights set on finding a way out of the village. She talked often about meeting a man who would change her life, someone who could offer her the luxury and comfort she longed for. Emily, on the other hand, was running away from that very life. But she understood why Julia dreamed of escaping poverty. The days at the supermarket passed quietly. Emily felt a sense of peace working alongside Julia, listening to the village gossip, and learning about the customers who came in regularly. It was a simple life, but for Emily, it was healing. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be pursued for her wealth, to be seen as nothing more than the keys to a fortune. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Emily was working behind the counter, a man walked into the supermarket. His name was Julius. He was well known in the village for being one of the wealthiest men around. Julius owned the largest house in the village, a grand structure that stood out among the simpler homes. He wasn't fabulously rich by city standards, but in the village, Julius was considered wealthy. He was tall and confident, with an air of authority that immediately caught Emily's attention. He smiled at her as he approached the counter to pay for his items. "Hello," he said, his voice smooth and pleasant. "I haven't seen you around here before. Are you new to the village?" Emily smiled politely. "Yes, I am. I've only been here for a few weeks." "Well, welcome," Julius said, handing over his money. "It's nice to have a fresh face in the village." As he walked out, Emily thought little of the encounter. Julius seemed polite, but she had learned to be careful with her heart after what had happened with Tony. She had no interest in getting involved in another relationship, especially not so soon after her last disappointment. However, It soon became clear that Julius was interested in her. Over the next few days, he began stopping by the supermarket more often, always finding a reason to talk to Emily. He complimented her on her work, asked about her day, and made casual conversation. At first, Emily brushed it off as friendliness, but as his visits became more frequent, she realized he was pursuing her. Julius wasn't the only one who noticed the growing connection. Julia, who had always dreamed of marrying a rich man, began to grow jealous. She had set her sights on Julius long before Emily had arrived in the village. In her eyes, Julius was her ticket out of the village, the man who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. But now, it seemed that Julius had turned his attention to Emily instead. One afternoon, after Julius had left the supermarket, Julia turned to Emily with a forced smile. "He likes you, you know." Emily looked at her, confused. "Who?" "Julius," Julia replied, her voice tight. "He's been coming here just to see you." Emily felt a pang of discomfort. "I'm not looking for anything right now," Emily said softly, trying to reassure Julia. "I'm just focusing on my job." Julia's expression softened a little, but there was still a flicker of envy in her eyes. "I hope so. I've always had my eye on Julius. He's the only man in this village who can give me the life I want." Emily didn't say anything more. She could see how much Julia wanted to leave the village, how much she longed for a life of wealth and comfort. But for Emily, wealth had only brought heartache. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in another situation where someone's interest in her might be more about what she could offer than who she was. As the days passed, Julius continued to show interest in Emily, but she kept her distance, unsure of whether she could trust him. And though she remained friendly with Julia, the tension between them grew. Emily could see that Julia's jealousy was simmering just beneath the surface. Once again, Emily found herself in a situation where her past and her present seemed to collide. She had come to this village to find peace, but it seemed that even here, love and trust were hard to find. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a bright, bustling day, and the local market was alive with activity. Children were playing, running around, and laughing as the villagers went about their day. Emily had just finished her shift at the supermarket and was walking down the road, her thoughts wandering. She noticed a group of boys playing football nearby, their game spilling onto the street. Before she could react, the ball soared through the air, heading straight for her. Just as she braced herself, a man rushed toward her, intending to push her out of the ball's path. But in his rush, he ended up swaying her right into his arms. For a moment, everything stopped. Emily found herself pressed against his chest, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. She knew how she felt about Adam, and no amount of money or status could change that. As she walked home that evening, Emily's thoughts returned to Adam. She didn't know where their friendship would lead, but for now, she was content to let it grow naturally. For the first time in a long time, she felt something genuine, something that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or family expectations, and that was enough. Adam sat back in the small cozy hotel room, the best one in the village. It wasn't much by city standards, but it was clean and comfortable, and that was enough for him. The room was dimly lit with simple wooden furniture and a large window overlooking the village. He could hear the faint sounds of people outside, but his mind was far away, lost in thoughts of Emily. He smiled to himself as he leaned back against the headboard, thinking about her, the way their paths had crossed unexpectedly, the way she had fallen into his arms that day when he tried to shield her from a football. He hadn't expected to meet someone like her when he first arrived in the village. In fact, he hadn't expected much at all when he took on the project. This was supposed to be a short-term escape from the pressure of city life, a way to get away from his parents' endless discussions about his future. But Emily had changed everything. What Emily didn't know was that Adam wasn't just any ordinary construction worker. He was actually David Adams, a self-made tech billionaire from one of the wealthiest families in the country. His parents, well-known socialites in the city, had raised him in a world of privilege and high expectations. Like Emily, he had grown up surrounded by wealth, but he had made a name for himself with his own business ventures. David had moved to the United States in his early 20s, where he built his tech company from the ground up. It wasn't long before his innovations in telecommunications technology caught the attention of major corporations, and his success skyrocketed. But along with that success came pressure. His parents, especially his mother, were always trying to push him toward an arranged marriage with someone they deemed suitable. Most recently, they had been pressuring him to meet the daughter of Mr. Johnson, the richest man in the city. David had resisted the idea of marrying someone just because their families aligned financially. The thought of an arranged marriage felt suffocating to him, especially since he didn't believe in marrying for convenience or status. He wanted something real. When the contract to install telecommunication devices underground in the village had come up, David had jumped at the chance to escape the city, if only for a little while. His team could have handled the project without him, but he saw it as an opportunity to get away from the noise, from the constant demands of his parents and the expectations that came with his wealth. For a few weeks, he could be just Adam, a construction worker, and no one would know his real identity. What he hadn't expected was to meet Emily. The first time he had seen her, he had been struck by her innocence. She didn't carry the usual airs of the high-class women he was used to back in the city. There was no pretense, no vanity, just a genuine warmth and simplicity about her. She had run right into him that day in the village, and from the moment he had held her in his arms, he had known she was different. He had sensed that she didn't see him as anyone special, just another ordinary worker trying to get by in the village, and that was what intrigued him the most. David had quickly decided that he liked being just Adam around her. He had told his workers to play along with the idea that he was just a regular construction worker. He didn't want Emily to know about his wealth or his background. He wanted to see if her feelings for him were real, not influenced by his status. In the past, women had been drawn to him for all the wrong reasons: his money, his power, his fame. But Emily seemed to like him for who he was, or at least for who she thought he was. David laughed quietly to himself as he thought about it. It was ironic, really. He had come to the village to get away from his family's demands and their obsession with wealth, and yet here he was, pretending to be someone he wasn't. But for the first time in a long time, he felt free. He didn't have to worry about impressing anyone or living up to his family's name. He could just be Adam, the man who was slowly falling for a sweet, innocent girl who didn't even know his real name. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and ran his hands through his hair. "Emily," he whispered her name softly to himself, smiling at the thought of her. There was something so refreshing about the way she saw the world. She wasn't jaded or cynical like the women he had met in the city. She wasn't after his money or trying to manipulate him for her own gain. In fact, she seemed completely unaware of his wealth, and that only made him more drawn to her. David's thoughts drifted back to their conversations. Every time they talked, she opened up a little more, revealing bits and pieces of her life. Though he had sensed there were things she wasn't telling him, he wasn't the only one with secrets, and he respected that. Whatever she was hiding, he figured it was probably just as complicated as his own story. Still, he admired her spirit, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, even though she was clearly used to simpler things. As David sat in his hotel room staring out the window at the setting sun, he realized something surprising. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his business, his wealth, or his family's expectations. He wasn't worrying about the latest tech deal or the next big project. All he could think about was Emily, her smile, her laughter, the way she looked at him with those wide, innocent eyes. He hadn't felt this way in a long time, and it made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had found something real here in this quiet little village. He had no idea how things would play out. Eventually, Emily would learn the truth about who he really was. But for now, he was content to let things unfold naturally. He wasn't in a hurry, and he didn't want to ruin the connection they had built by revealing too much too soon. As the last light of the day faded from the sky, David smiled to himself. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. The days in the village seemed to grow warmer and more peaceful for Emily. As her bond with Adam deepened, they spent more and more time together, sharing long walks by the river, quiet conversations under the shade of trees, and laughter over simple meals. Emily found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Emily found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Adam was unlike anyone she had ever known, gentle, humble, and sincere. His presence in her life had brought a sense of joy she hadn't felt in a long time. With Adam, she felt safe, as though the pain of her past had finally started to heal. Tony's betrayal and the complexities of her old life seemed like distant memories. Every day she spent with Adam reminded her that love didn't have to be complicated by wealth, status, or power. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt free. As for Adam, David in truth, he had never expected to feel this way about someone so soon after arriving in the village. He had come here to escape the pressures of his family and the constant talk of arranged marriages. But Emily had taken him by surprise. Her warmth and innocence had captivated him from the moment they met, and as their relationship blossomed, he found himself falling for her more each day. One evening, after a quiet dinner by the river, Adam and Emily sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was cool, and the village was beginning to settle down for the night. Emily looked over at Adam and smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "I'm really glad we met," she said softly. Adam turned to her, his eyes warm with affection. "So am I, Emily." There was a brief silence between them, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes when two people truly enjoy each other's presence. Emily glanced up at Adam, her heart fluttering as she caught the way he was looking at her. It was a look she had never seen before, a mixture of admiration, care, and something deeper. Without thinking, Emily leaned in just slightly, and Adam, feeling the same pull, closed the small distance between them. Their lips met in a soft, gentle kiss, the world around them fading away. For a moment, it was just the two of them, lost in the warmth of that kiss, both feeling the connection between them deepen in a way that words couldn't express. When they finally pulled apart, Emily blushed, her heart racing. Adam smiled at her, his hand brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Neither of them said a word, but the kiss had said everything. They were no longer just two friends spending time together. There was something much stronger, much deeper growing between them. As their relationship blossomed, Emily found herself happier than she had ever been. She had come to the village to escape the complications of her old life, and in Adam, she had found not only love but also a sense of belonging. But while Emily's heart was full of joy, there was another person whose feelings had turned bitter and angry, Julia. She had watched from the sidelines as Emily and Adam grew closer, and couldn't hide her jealousy any longer. She had once dreamed that Julius would choose her, and when he began showing interest in Emily, Julia had felt betrayed. But now, with Adam in the picture, her anger had reached its boiling point. One afternoon, as Julius was walking through the village, Julia stopped him. "Julius, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. Julius, who had been distracted by thoughts of Emily, looked at her with a puzzled expression. "What is it, Julia?" Julia took a deep breath, her anger barely contained. "Forget about Emily. She's not interested in you. She's never going to be. You've been wasting your time chasing after her." Julius frowned, his pride wounded. "What are you talking about? She just needs more time." "No," Julia interrupted, shaking her head. "She's in love with Adam. Haven't you seen the way they've been together? She's not going to choose you, Julius. You need to stop chasing her and look at what's right in front of you." Julius's face darkened with realization. He had noticed how close Emily and Adam had become, but he hadn't wanted to believe it. Now, hearing it from Julia, the truth stung even more. Julia stepped closer, her voice softening. "Why are you wasting your time on someone who doesn't want you, when I'm right here? I've always been here, Julius. I've always cared about you." For a moment, Julius said nothing, his thoughts spinning. He had spent so much time pursuing Emily, believing that his wealth and status would eventually win her over. But now it seemed that she had chosen someone else, and Julia, who had always been by his side, was offering herself to him. "I don't know," Julius muttered, still processing everything. "I just thought." "Forget about her," Julia said, her voice laced with desperation. "You deserve someone who appreciates you. Someone like me." Meanwhile, as Julia and Julius had their tense conversation, Emily and Adam's relationship continued to grow. But as much as Adam, David, enjoyed his time with Emily, he knew that his time in the village couldn't last forever. The project was nearing its end, and soon he would have to return to the city. The thought of leaving Emily behind weighed heavily on his heart, but he couldn't keep up the charade of being a construction worker forever. One day, as they walked together through the village, Adam knew it was time to tell Emily the truth, or at least part of it. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice serious. Emily looked up at him, sensing that something was on his mind. "What's wrong?" Adam took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I have to leave the village soon. There's a job opportunity in the city, and I can't pass it up." Emily's heart sank at his words. "Leave? For how long?" "I don't know," Adam replied honestly. "But it's important. I've been putting it off for a while, but I can't stay here forever." Emily looked down at the ground, her heart heavy with the thought of him leaving. She had grown so attached to him, and the idea of him leaving the village left a hollow feeling in her chest. Emily looked down at the ground, her heart heavy with the thought of him leaving. She had grown so attached to him, and the idea of him leaving the village left a hollow feeling in her chest. "I'm going to miss you," she whispered. Adam smiled gently, reaching for her hand. "You don't have to." Emily looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Adam hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "Come with me, Emily. There's nothing for you here in this village. You could have a better life in the city." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Come with you?" "Yes," Adam said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You don't have to stay here. We could start something new together in the city." Emily walked quietly beside Adam, her mind spinning with the offer he had just made. Leave the village and go with him to the city. The very thought stirred a mix of emotions in her. Part of her longed to be with Adam. He had brought so much joy and peace into her life. But the city he was speaking of wasn't just any city. It was the same city she had left behind, the same place where her parents lived, and where the life of wealth and privilege that she had abandoned still waited for her. Was she ready to go back? Could she face the world she had run from, even if it was with Adam by her side? Adam squeezed her hand gently as they walked. "I know it's a lot to think about, but we could have a good life together, Emily. A fresh start. I don't want to pressure you, but I care about you, and I don't want to leave you behind." Emily smiled weakly, her heart torn. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "I just need some time." Adam nodded, his face soft with understanding. "Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever decision you make, I'll support it." As they walked back toward the village, Emily's mind wandered back to the memories of her old life, the luxury, the expectations, and the emptiness that had followed her every step. She had come here to escape all that, to find something genuine. And now, with Adam, she had found love, the kind of love she had been searching for. But was she ready to return to the life she had left behind? While Emily was deep in thought about her future, Julia had her own struggles to deal with. Her frustration with Emily and Adam's blossoming relationship had reached its peak, and she felt desperate. After trying to convince Emily to choose Julius and realizing that Emily was never going to change her mind, Julia decided it was time to act. She had spent so much time hoping that Julius would eventually notice her, but it was clear now that he was more interested in pursuing Emily, no matter how much time had passed. That evening, Julia made up her mind. She would go and visit Julius at his house and see if there was still a chance for her. Maybe, just maybe, she could finally win his attention. She arrived at Julius's house, the largest in the village, with its well-kept yard and 4-bedroom bungalow that everyone admired. Knocking on the door, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Julius opened the door and greeted her with his usual confident smile, but Julia noticed something different in his demeanor. He seemed distracted, tense, even. "Julia," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "What brings you here?" Julia hesitated for a moment, unsure how to start. "I wanted to talk to you about us," she said softly, hoping to find the right words. Julius raised an eyebrow. "Us?" "I've been waiting, Julius," Julia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Waiting for you to notice me, to realize that I've always been here for you. But it feels like you've been chasing after Emily this whole time, even though it's clear she's not interested." Julius sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily's different, Julia. She's not like the other girls." Julia felt a wave of anger rise within her. "What do you mean she's different? She's an orphan, just like me. We're from the same village. What makes her so special?" Julius hesitated, then muttered under his breath, "She may be an orphan, but she has a certain class about her. She's not like the local girls." Julia's heart sank. "So what? You think you're too good for the rest of us?" Before Julius could answer, a knock came at the door, and a young woman entered, looking nervous and upset. Julia recognized her immediately. It was a girl from the village, one of the quiet types who rarely spoke up. Her name was Mary, and she looked distressed. "Julius, we need to talk," Mary said, her voice trembling. Julia watched as Julius's face turned pale. "Not now, Mary," he said, trying to usher her out of the house. "No, we need to talk now," Mary insisted, her voice growing louder. "You need to take responsibility for what you've done. You can't just pretend it didn't happen." Julia's eyes widened in shock as the pieces fell into place. "What's going on?" she demanded. Julius looked cornered, his confidence crumbling. "It's nothing, just a misunderstanding." But Mary wasn't backing down. "I'm pregnant, Julius. And you're the father. You promised me we'd figure this out, but now you're trying to deny it." Julia felt her world shatter. The man she had admired, the man she had wanted so desperately, was nothing but a liar. Not only had Julius been pursuing Emily, but now he had gotten another girl pregnant, and was trying to cover it up. "You're unbelievable," Julia spat, disgusted. "I thought you were different. But you're just another selfish man who only cares about himself." Julius tried to explain, but Julia didn't want to hear any more. She stormed out of the house, her heart filled with disappointment and anger. Julius had never cared about her. And now she saw him for what he truly was, a man who only valued women for what they could do for him, not for who they were. Not that he owed her any explanation, after all. She wasn't the one he liked. But she had loved and admired him all along, and finding out about this was painful. Meanwhile, as Julia dealt with her heartbreak, Emily had finally made a decision. She had spent days thinking about Adam's offer to move to the city with him. It was a big step, and she knew that returning to the city meant facing everything she had run away from. But she couldn't deny how much she loved Adam, and the thought of starting a new life with him. Emily sat alone by the riverside, her feet dangling above the water, the soft current flowing beneath her like the time she could no longer control. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. Returning to the city with Adam would mean more than just a change of scenery. It would mean revisiting the very life she had tried so hard to escape. But Adam had shown her a love so gentle, so pure, that it made her question everything she once believed about the world she left behind. Was it possible to find love and still hold on to her independence? Could she trust him with her heart and her truth? She closed her eyes and remembered the kiss they had shared, the softness of his touch, and the look in his eyes that spoke of sincerity. He wasn't like Tony or Julius. Adam was different. The next day, she found him near the construction site where he often worked with his team. He looked up and smiled the moment he saw her. "I've made my decision," Emily said, her voice steady. Adam stood straighter, waiting. "I'll come with you, but only under one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I want to be honest with you, completely. But I need you to be honest with me too. No secrets. No lies. We go into this with full trust, or we don't go at all." Adam's smile faded slightly. He looked down at the ground for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "You're right. You deserve to know the truth. There's something I haven't told you either." They walked to the riverbank, away from the noise of the village, and sat under a tree where the breeze rustled gently. "I'm not just Adam," he began. "My real name is David Adams. I'm the CEO of a tech company based in the U.S. I came here to escape my family's pressure and the spotlight. I didn't expect to meet someone like you." Emily's eyes widened in shock. "You're David Adams? My parents tried to introduce me to you before I left the city." He blinked. "Wait. Your parents are James and Mary Johnson?" They stared at each other, mouths agape. Then, they both burst into laughter. "The universe is playing a big joke on us," Emily said, shaking her head. "Apparently," David replied, his laughter dying into a gentle smile. "But maybe it's fate too." They sat in silence, the river flowing calmly beside them, as two hearts finally aligned not just by choice, but by truth. "So," Emily said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "we were both running from the same life, only to find each other in the middle of nowhere." "And I'm never running again," David whispered. The city skyline loomed ahead as David's car glided through the highway. Emily stared quietly through the window, watching the tall buildings rise higher and higher. Everything looked the same, but she didn't feel the same. Something in her had shifted. Gone was the girl who felt invisible in a mansion full of luxury. Now, she was a woman who had seen life through simpler eyes, and found herself along the way. David pulled into the driveway of a sleek apartment complex overlooking the city. It wasn't his main mansion. He had chosen this quieter space because he knew Emily wouldn't want to dive straight back into the noise of the elite world. "This is home for now," he said gently as they got out of the car. Emily smiled. "It's perfect." That evening, they attended a formal charity gala hosted by the Johnson Family's Foundation. Emily hadn't planned on going, but her father insisted. "You've been gone for months," he had said. "At least let people see you're alive and well." She wore a graceful emerald green gown, elegant but modest. David walked beside her, dressed in a dark suit. As they entered the grand hall, all eyes turned to them. There was a moment of silence. And then, whispers. "That's Emily Johnson. Isn't that David Adams, the tech billionaire?" "They're together." Her parents spotted her across the room. Mary Johnson gasped, her glass of champagne nearly slipping from her fingers. "Emily and David." James Johnson chuckled softly and turned to his wife. "I told you they'd find each other their own way." Emily approached them with grace, David's hand resting lightly on her back. "Mother, Father," she greeted. Mary blinked, still stunned. "Emily, what happened? You left with a suitcase and no plan. And now you're standing beside David Adams." David nodded respectfully. "Sir." "Ma'am." "I know this may come as a surprise. But Emily and we met the real way. Not through arrangements. Not through wealth. We met when we were both just people." James clapped him on the back. "You have my blessing." Mary stared, her voice barely a whisper. "You mean you don't mind she didn't come through the front door in a gown, but through the back door of a village?" Emily stepped forward. "Mom, for the first time in my life, I met someone who saw me, not my name, not my background, just me. That's all I ever wanted." Mary looked between the two of them, her eyes misty. "Well then," she said softly, "welcome home." Later that evening, as music played and guests danced under crystal chandeliers, Emily and David stood on a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. "We really made it back," Emily whispered. David smiled. "Not just back. Forward." They stood side by side, no longer running from their pasts, but walking into a future they were choosing together. Here is episode 11 of Billionaire Heiress Pretends to be a Poor Waitress to Find True Love.